Welcome back to the cEDH Network. I'm your host, Dan, and today I have crawled out from underneath of my rock to bring you guys another deck tech here on the channel. And this was really exciting for me because this is actually my favorite, pretty much of all of my cEDH decks, I think, ever. And in the current metaverse, we've actually been performing relatively well with this. In the last 2 tournaments, I've converted into a top cut. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to make it to top 4, but we had a really good run and I'm pretty excited about it. So without further ado, I don't have a lot of announcements to go through, so let's just jump right into it, guys. Today, we are going to be talking about Rona, the Herald of Invasion. Rona is a really cool commander in Dimir color identity. She's 1 in the blue for a legendary creature, human wizard. Whenever you cast a legendary spell, you untap Rona. Then she has the ability to tap to loot, draw a card, discard a card, and for 5 in a Phyrexian black, you can transform her, but only as a sorcery. Now, the backside isn't really valuable in almost any application except for one, which we're going to get to, but we'll take a read anyway. It's Rona, Tolarian Obliterator. She's a 5/5 with trample, and whenever a source deals damage to her, that source's controller exiles a card from their hand at random. If it's a land card, you get to put it onto the battlefield. Otherwise, you can cast it without paying its mana cost. Moving back over to the front side, we're going to talk about the age-old question, which is, well, why play Rona, right? Like, why not just play blue farm? Why not play more colors, be on better cards, so on and so forth? And this is a hard question to answer, and I think this is a good practice to go through with any deck that you're considering building. If I'm niching down my color pool, I'm already taking myself off of a lot of good card options. So what is my reason, right? So for me, that has to come down to what the deck's value proposition is and how much advantage do I intend to get off of that versus just playing a more colorful generic pile. In the case of Rona, we're going to talk about that pretty much in detail, but let's start by just saying, what does she actually offer us on the surface? So right off the rip, obviously, the main thing she's doing for us is a form of card advantage. This is really just card selection, where we get to sculpt our hands through the tap to loot effect. Having a commander that can loot us even multiple times in a turn cycle is a pretty powerful effect, especially at this mana value. Now, if that was all that Rona offered us, I don't really think that she'd be viable enough, right? Because we have plain and simple card advantage engines that are proven to be stronger than this effect. But it certainly is not all that she offers. You see, the most important part of Rona is actually that first part of her text box when it says whenever you cast a legendary spell, you untap Rona. Now, this is going to be where we discuss the core combo of the deck that really starts to flesh out that value proposition. Now, before we get fully into it, I do want to take a second to acknowledge that I know Rona is not entirely new to cEDH. But one of my favorite things about cEDH is as new cards come along, or even just player mentalities or meta shifts, we have the ability to look back at old lists or older commanders and really innovate on them and possibly create something new. Now, in older versions of Rona's list, it was more of a traditional good stuff pile, kind of Dimir good stuff, with the specific advantage of being able to use Rona's looting ability to crack Doomsday piles or something like that. Which, although yes, can be a strong effect, I don't actually think it's enough of a reasoning to invest fully into the Rona strategy. So instead, my variant of Rona here is actually leaning harder into our core combo, which let me get a move on and actually tell you guys about it. Now, the core combo we're looking at here actually requires Rona, and then it's going to function more like an A+B to get infinite mana. So the first piece we're going to need is either Mox Amber or Mox Opal. Now, these are legendary artifacts that can go mana positive. Obviously, Mox Opal conditionary on you having additional artifacts for Metalcraft, and Mox Amber conditional that you actually have Rona in play. But we need her anyway for the combo. The important part of this is that both of these Moxen are legendary, so they will trigger Rona's cast trigger to untap. Now, the next part of the combo is something that's been gaining traction or popularity of late, which is actually Retraction Helix or Banishing Knack. If you guys are familiar with this, it does work in the exact same way that you know of because of Valley Floodcaller. We're going to be targeting Rona with Banishing Knack or Retraction Helix, giving her the ability to tap and return a permanent, a non-land permanent, to its owner's hand. We're going to use that effect to tap target our own Mox Amber or Mox Opal, bounce it to our hand after producing a mana. Then we go to recast the Mox Amber or Mox Opal, trigger Rona to untap, create the mana, and continue the loop. Once we've done this, we have generated infinite mana if it's Mox Opal of both our colors. If it's Mox Amber, it's going to be of just of blue, which is actually really important. We're going to talk a little bit about that later. Now, you may be thinking a couple things. One, this is just mana, right? Rona's not a self-contained outlet. She's not like a Thrasios. So what are we going to do with that infinite mana? Isn't this an A plus B plus C in that instance? And although you're kind of right, we're going to talk a lot about that. That's going to be kind of the main focus of the video, so hang tight. And the second thing you might be wondering is, okay, so big deal, right? It's infinite mana. A lot of decks can do that. However, this is where I think that the value proposition really fully balloons, because Rona's infinite mana combo is the most efficient, as far as I'm aware, in the entirety of cEDH. And not enough people are talking about it. Guys, this is a 0 mana infinite combo. We play the Mox Amber, which generates us a mana in order to then cast the Retraction Helix. Now, I don't know if that's really sinking in with you guys, but that's freaking insane. You can literally tap out for value pieces, tutors, whatever you need on the turn that you plan to combo and still be able to present with just dropping a rock. Not to mention that the versatility of the pieces actually required in the combo it's 2 mana rocks, Moxes, right? These are powerful cards. And in addition to that, 2 pieces of relatively relevant removal, especially in today's metagame. Now, another thing I wanted to address really quickly about our combo here, since it is a traditionally Storm combo, right? We need to go through an infinite cast loop. A lot of people worry about how this fights through things like Heuristic and Fish, and although it can be a little bit of a challenge, we are actually a lot better off fighting into that scenario than some other decks. Because again, our combo involves resolving a Retraction Helix or Banishing Knack on our Rona. We don't just have to use this for our loop, we can also use this to bounce a Heuristic Study. Now you may be thinking, how can we do that and do our loop at the same time? As long as you have another piece in your hand, another legendary that can be used to untap your Rona. Let's use, for example, because it's right here, Ashiok. If I go to start my combo, I can cast Mox Amber, make a mana, return it. I do this until I have 3 mana. Now I cast my Mox Amber, untap Rona, and instead of tapping Rona to bounce the Mox Amber, I now use my 3 mana to cast Ashiok. I will have another untap trigger on Rona, but I hold priority and I tap Rona to bounce the Heuristic Study. Untap trigger resolves, Ashiok resolves, and I can go back to tapping Rona to bounce Mox Amber, so on and so forth. And the more legendaries you have in hand, the more additional bounces you'll be able to resolve if you need to fight through multiple pieces. I know, hopefully I've yammered on enough to make my point with that one. So we'll move forward to talk about that important principle I talked about, the plus C element, right? The outlet for our mana, as well as the overall build, the direction of the deck, what we're trying to accomplish. Now, it may seem a little bit unorthodox, but I think the best way to start going through this idea of the outlets in the deck is just go straight down card type by card type in sections. And I really like starting here with the Planeswalkers because they help to highlight a core principle of the deck. You see, we're looking to make a lot of our outlets double as just generically powerful cards, whether or not they help us into our mid-range pivot or really put a pinch on our opponents or generate some kind of advantage for us. And you can see an example of that starting right here with Ashiok, the Dream Render. Now, I'm not going to go into detail and read all the cards throughout the list. I'm going to assume you know a bunch of these, but Ashiok you might be unfamiliar with, and just for the example, we'll read her. Ashiok is a 3-mana legendary planeswalker that starts with 5 loyalty, has the passive effect that spells and abilities your opponents control can't cause their controllers to search their library, and for -1, target player mills 4 cards, then each opponent exiles their graveyard. Now, Ashiok alone is cEDH playable. It doesn't see a ton of play because it's a little higher up on the curve, but the ability to stop our opponents from being able to search their library is an incredibly strong effect. And even though her active doesn't necessarily seem strong, this is where we get into the outlet conversation. Because Ashiok is a legendary spell, she still untaps Rona when we cast her. As a result, if we've already gone infinite for mana, we can still continue our main combos loop, but instead of looping the Mox Amber, we can now start to loop a legendary permanent like Ashiok. Tapping Rona to bounce Ashiok, using our infinite mana to recast, getting an untap on Rona, and then we get to activate Ashiok's ability. What this will create is it will mill all of our opponents out and exile all of their graveyards. In effect, exiling all of our opponents' libraries. Now, going into a little bit more detail with this one, I'm sure you guys can start to piece together things as I scroll over the next few. Next up here on the list, we have Narset, the Part of Veils. Narset shuts off opponents' ability to draw more than 1 card per turn and allows us to look at the top 4 and put a non-creature, non-land card from among them into our hand as an active. As you can imagine, if we are looping this, effectively we're going to draw out our entire library. We'll first start by putting all non-creature, non-land cards in, but this will include some other things which we can then start to loop to draw out the rest of the deck. Might seem counterintuitive, but also with Tezzeret the Seeker. Now, Tezzeret is here to do Tezzeret things as well, right? For 5 mana, we can go and find the One Ring, tutor it up right to the battlefield. Notably, Tezzeret can tutor up our Mox Amber, Mox Opal if -X is 0. But if we are looping Tezzeret, we can use that -X to pull out every artifact, with the exception of one relatively expensive one, out of our library onto the battlefield, which, as you'll see when we get there, is going to create other outlets and allow us to win the game. Now, this video is going to be a deep dive, so we're going to keep kind of going through these cards because this is really the bread and butter of the deck. It's super important you understand this as far as piloting the deck goes. But if you kind of get the gist and you want to just scroll through it, totally fine. I'll have flagged in the description below, and you should be able to see it on the bar, some sections so you guys can skip to the next section of the video if you're kind of down pat with this idea. Moving on to the creatures, we're going to take a look here. Immediately we got one. This is Basim. I'm not going to attempt to butcher the rest of the name there, but I'm sure some Assassin's Creed aficionados could let me know the phonetics down below. Basim is just kind of a generic card advantage engine. For 2 mana, we get a creature that says whenever you cast a historic spell, you get to draw the card, and he can't be blocked that turn, but the ability only triggers once each turn. Now, however, we do have the ability to reset that since our core combo requires bouncing permanents. So again, kind of counterintuitive, but Basim will draw you your entire library. Now, notably, I do want to take a second to acknowledge the clone package that we're running here. Clones are powerful in the metagame right now, just in a general sense, but they're pretty strong here in Rona because we have a lot of Thrasios and Kinnan wandering around, and those can both be outlets that we can utilize as well for our combo. Thrasios is probably pretty obvious for you guys. Generic, infinite outlet, boop, done. Kinnan, however, might be a little bit more scrupulous. Yeah, no, I don't know. But he does require green and blue for the combo to work. However, our clone will still clone the colors of Kinnan and the legendary property, which will allow our Mox Amber to tap for green because it sees our clone Kinnan. As a result, when we continue through the Rona combo, we can start to add green instead, which in effect will produce our infinite mana for flipping through Kinnan. And we built the deck with this specifically in mind so that we have some non-human targets which will guarantee us a win after we've done that. Notably, one of them you're looking at, which is Faerie Mastermind. Faerie Mastermind, even outside of that aforementioned example, is also an outlet. Through Faerie Mastermind, we can draw each player a card for an investment of 4. This is a really clunky and sometimes dangerous line to go through, but as long as nobody's packing Trick Bind, it is almost guaranteed that you're going to be able to come out on top of this duel. As you draw through your libraries with your opponents, you'll draw into other options for you to pivot into so you can stop kind of drawing out the table. But again, you're going into a war where you have infinite resources. So even though you're drawing 3-1 cards, you have infinite mana. Continuing down the list here, you see a couple more of those clones we were talking about. We got the Mockingbird as well as Phyrexian Metamorph. We'll talk about a couple of these other pieces again when we get to the other sections. Notably, I do want to say that we have Orcish Bowmaster, not only because Orcish Bowmaster is obviously a cracked in half card, but this is the other non-human piece of the combo when we're going through with Kinnan Loops. Kinnan Loops will find us Orcish Bowmaster and Faerie Mastermind, and then as we're drawing out the table, we're also getting triple Bowmaster pings for each activation. In most case scenarios, it's going to allow us to ping down the table before they really have anything to do with us, and if they have interaction along the way, we can reactivate it on top, produce more triggers, so on and so forth. Again, dangerous, but it'll work. Cards like Spellseeker and also down there Trinket Mage are really cool because not only do they help to set up our combo by finding us important pieces like the Retraction Helix or Mox Amber, but they also then are able to outlet our combo because we are bouncing permanents. You bounce the Spellseeker or the Trinket Mage, recast, and then you're able to go and search for another card which is going to get you into your outlet. And you'll see what I mean in a second. Valley Floodcaller is another card we do need to acknowledge because not only is this a flash enabler, super strong, a backup Rona because we can do our core combo through Valley Floodcaller instead, but Valley Floodcaller is also an outlet. As long as it doesn't have summoning sickness, we are able to put the Retraction Helix on Valley Floodcaller to start going through our main combo loop, but we'll also be untapping Rona. We cast Mox Amber, Valley Floodcaller untaps because of its trigger, Rona untaps because of her trigger, Valley Floodcaller does the bounce for the combo, and Rona taps to loot. Now, if we have Valley Floodcaller and Rona and we're doing our combo, we can loot through the entire library, and obviously we're on Thoracle. I didn't say it, but I think it's pretty obvious, and we'll get there. Next up here, we have Venser. Now, Venser is a bit of a pet card for me, and admittedly, if you like to cut it, you probably could and run something like Force of Negation instead. However, I really have a soft spot for Venser. This is one of the earlier cards to me when I started getting into Magic. I just think it's so cool, and it's really good in the deck. So we'll give him a read in case you guys haven't seen this one specifically. This is 4 mana for a 2/2 flash legendary creature human wizard. When it enters the battlefield, you return target spell or permanent to its owner's hand. Venser is a bounce, not a traditional counter, and he can interact both on the stack and the battlefield. And it's on a creature body, giving him a lot of versatile interaction points, but he does cost 4 mana. If that was all he did, I couldn't really necessarily justify, but he's a legendary. And because of his unique templating, he is able to produce an outlet for us. Just kind of like in the Valley Floodcaller example, Venser comes down, and because Venser's templating allows him to target himself, you have the ETB target Venser to bounce, but you've gained the untap of Rona, right? Now with your infinite mana, you just recast the Venser, creating another untap trigger. Hold priority, tap, loot, untap, bounce the Venser. Alternatively, you can kind of use Venser as like a hole breaker horror, wherein you don't target Venser with the zone ability and traditionally bounce Venser with the Rona activation, and use Venser's ability to bounce all of your opponent's permanents, including lands. Pretty spicy. Now, next up here, we do have what I call an unfortunate include, but it just cleans up so many lines that I couldn't not have it in. It is Walking Ballista. So Walking Ballista is a traditional, just generic outlet. You guys know this one. It gets around almost everything in the format. It's incredibly strong, but it's a little bit of a dead card. I would be a little bit more remiss that I have to run it, with the exception of the fact that I am on Rona. So if it is sitting in my hand as a dead card, I can always loot it away. And you'll see later, it can still be accessible through the graveyard. So it's not the biggest tragedy if we have to dump it for a minute. Moving on to the sorceries. Demonic Tutor will be able to find us, obviously, any card that can outlet. Fabricate is going to find us cards that can outlet, as well as set up our combo. Imperial Seal, same thing. Merchant Scroll is going to find us set up for our combo through Retraction Helix, but also can find us an outlet in Gifts Ungiven, which we'll talk about in a second. We got Scheming Symmetry, especially powerful in Rona because we're able to crack it before our opponents get access to their tutor. We are a stock up gamer. At the end of the day, the math comes out to about like every 1 in 3, 1 in 4 cards is going to be an outlet for our combo, or some way to cantrip ourselves into an outlet. So stock up seeing 5 cards, pretty decent odds. Last but not least, we have Transmute Artifact, again, setting up our combo by finding our Mox Amber, or setting up an outlet for the combo. Once we get to the artifacts, you'll see what I'm saying. Moving down to the instance, we'll go a little bit more rapid speed because it's kind of the same deal. Obviously here you see that Banishing Knack, blah, blah. Demonic Consultation can find us an outlet, Rona combo. We have Gifts Ungiven. So if I do need to find gifts and have a pretty confirmed outlet for our infinite mana, there's some more roundabout ways you could do it. But the main thing we're going to be doing with it is finding ourselves an Agatha Soul Cauldron, a Faerie Mastermind, there she blows, a Walking Ballista, and then one other piece that's just kind of generic, and you'll see why it doesn't really matter, but I'd like to say the One Ring. So I'm sure some of you wise-minded individuals out there already kind of put it together, but if we have Infinite Bloom, we send a Gifts Ungiven and it resolves. Having the ability to find that specific pile of cards gives our opponents really no good choices. If they give us the Agatha Soul Cauldron or the Walking Ballista, either way, we're going to walk away with Walking Ballista as a potential sink, which is going to clean up the game. This will incentivize them to give us the other 2 cards, which if it's Faerie Mastermind, again, gives us another way to draw out libraries. And no matter what else you staple on there, I just say the One Ring, for example, if it's a card that's going to win you the game, then you're good to go. They don't really have a choice but to give us a beautiful outlet. So it's probably a GG if it resolves. We also are running a traditional gifts pile, but we'll talk about it in a second. Of course, we have Limdul's Vault, which can help to set up our combo, but also set up an outlet. We have Mystical Teachings. Now, this is a cool one. Shout out to TTC, the Thunder Conductor. Check him out on YouTube and Twitch. Really awesome guy. I've had a great pleasure playing with him in the past. This is actually a card that he put me onto. I used to be on, what's that card with like the head? It's got the eyeballs in it. Oh, man. Memory Deluge as my form of a flashback outlet. I think this is really pivotal because if we're going through our combo and we're left with, let's say, just 1 card in hand, let's say a Mystical Tutor. Having a top deck tutor, you would think we'd be able to crack it with Rona, but if it's the last card in our hand, unfortunately, we don't have anything to pitch to the loot, which means we're going to have to loot the card that we find. So having one card in the list that has flashback in order to enable us to utilize a top deck tutor or something like that right at the end of our combo in order to still have an outlet is kind of really powerful. Plus, it goes without saying that Mystical Teachings, being able to search for an instant or a card with flash, can go and find us a Faerie Mastermind if we need a draw engine or an outlet in that way, or it can find us an instant to set up our combo through Retraction Helix or Banishing Knack, or just find us interaction. If you're pushed into the mid-range, this is not an entirely dead card as you kind of hold up mana for interaction and can pivot into this on an end step before your turn. Now here's where I'd like to take a second to actually talk about this black pip idea, and this is where we're going to talk about the flip side of Rona. Because Mox Amber being our most consistent ability to combo, since we don't necessarily need the Metalcraft, does make it so most of the times we're producing infinite blue, not infinite black. As a result, the deck is constructed to be able to function more off of blue pips than off of black pips, but in this particular situation, and a couple others, you might need or want that black pip while you're comboing off. In that circumstance, this is where it actually matters to flip Rona, because we do have infinite blue, right? So we can go ahead and sink 5 of that infinite blue and 2 life into the Phyrexian to flip Rona over to her backside, which is considered a blue and black legendary. Now she will no longer have the whenever you cast a legendary on tap ability, so we won't be able to go infinite with our black, but we will get one more tap of our Mox Amber now that she's on her backside in order to produce a single black mana. As long as that single black mana can then pivot you into a more traditional outlet, you don't need to keep going through the loop. It is actually a valuable maneuver. So scooting back down here to our Mystical Teachings, there it is. You can kind of see, what I'm talking about here, because if I have to flip over Rona to grab a black mana in order to flash back the Mystical Teachings, this will allow me to go for an instant or a flash creature for the sake of ease without having to complicate the lines. Let's say you could get gifts Ungiven, or you could just straight up get Faerie Mastermind, and both those things are going to be pure outlets. You won't need to go through the bounce on a loop anymore, and you can win the game. Continuing on, of course, we have Tainted Pact, which can go and find us something, Vampiric Tutor, blah-de-blah. We are on Agatha's Soul Cauldron, we talked about in the gifts pile, but again, this just generically allows us to kind of bin that Walking Ballista or Faerie Mastermind early and still gain the ability. Notably, it does let us steal Ranger Captains or things that people really aren't paying attention to as the game progresses, maybe a Kinnan here or there. I also really like the idea of taking advantage of Rona's untapped ability. For instance, if we're able to steal a mana dork with Agatha's Soul Cauldron, all of a sudden Rona can tap for mana, potentially multiple mana in a turn if we hit that untap, which makes her even more valuable of a piece. Not to mention, it's also a colorless legendary artifact for 2 CMC. This is relatively important in the list and lets us do a lot of stuff. But I digress, we're talking about outlets, so let's finish it up. All right, next we have Moonsilver Key. This is another situation where we're going to be able to find our combo piece. We can go and get Mox Amber off of it, but we can also pivot this into an outlet in a very unique way. We're going to get to it. It's right down there, don't worry. Now here you go. It is the Mightstone and Weakstone. This is actually a legendary artifact that has a mana ability because it taps to add 2 colorless for the whole like Power Stone only for artifacts or whatever thing. But most notably, it does have an ETB to draw 2 cards. So if we're looping this with our Rona combo, we can draw out our library and we can find it off Moonsilver Key. Pretty dope. Next up, we got the One Ring. This is a legendary that I'm quite sure you're familiar with, but it's legendary, so we can loop it with Rona. Cast it, untap Rona, tap it, draw a card, then tap Rona to bounce it. All of a sudden, we've drawn our library with the One Ring. WISHCLAW Talisman can do the same song and dance, find us our piece, blah-de-blah. And even down here in the lands, we have an oldie, but a goodie card I really like. It's Tolaria West. Now this is a tap land. I kind of try to think about it more as a spell than a land, but it does feel good as a land in a pinch, especially if we're pitching it to Mox Diamond. Tolaria West comes into play tapped, adds a blue, pretty simple, but it does have transmute for 1, a blue, and a blue. Now here's where I'll take a second to actually talk a little bit more about the Walking Ballista, but Tolaria West can transmute to find us our artifact to start our combo off. It can find us Mox Amber, Mox Opal, or it can also find us an outlet by transmuting to grab Walking Ballista. Tolaria West and Trinket Mage are kind of the main reasons I ended up going on to the Walking Ballista. I may be a little bit more cooked than the average bear about this, but I think the concept of this idea, I've spoken about it before, this idea of tutor flexibility, it is so huge. having your tutors be able to find you not just one niche piece, right? Having Trinket Mage not being able to find me just Mox Amber, a way to set up my combo, instead being able to find me a piece for my combo and an outlet, I think makes their card quality just skyrocket in the specifics of my list. Because I know when I see Trinket Mage, it really represents two cards, two of my pivotal pieces. It represents the Mox Amber and it represents the outlet, especially because in our deck, our combo bounces and resets permanents. This on top of the fact that Walking Ballista is just super clean, a really good win con, and that synergies with gifts and all that other stuff. These are the main reasons why I eventually caved and put it in the deck. All right, guys, now that wraps it up for the conversation about the outlets of the deck. I know that was kind of lengthy, but again, I think this is the most important key concept that we're working with here. And I hope you guys really understand that idea of our cards that offer generic value, by Floodcaller being the flash enabler, Venser being a piece of interaction, so on and so forth, Ashiok, Narset being kind of a staxier piece against our opponents, how all of these cards represent a value on their own in isolation, a strong, powerful card effect, but also a way to outlet our combo. This is so important to me because we can kind of ignore that concept of needing an outlet to our combo. Yes, you need to know the deck, you need to understand what cards represent the ability to have an outlet, but the statistics, the way the deck that is built, the chance that you'll have a card that outlets, this allows the Rona combo to function more like a traditional A+B and not worry so much about the fact that you need somewhere to put that mana. And by building our deck in this way and allowing it to be a true A+B combo, we now have the most efficient A+B infinite mana combo in the game, arguably. Now, I do want to take a second to scroll back through the deck and acknowledge the other pieces that we're running, kind of more generic cards, interactions, so on and so forth, as a way to just flesh out the brew and let you see the rest. So we'll just scroll on down again, address some of the cards you guys saw earlier that we didn't necessarily talk about. Open Gear Perk. Again, of course, we're turbo leaning. We're in Dimir, so we don't have access to a lot of silence effects, but it is also a one generic mana legendary, which can grab us a loot really quickly or an additional bounce, take care of a Ristic or a fish when we're trying to combo off really easily. Right next to it, we're looking at another version of our silence effects. We're on Malevolent Hermit. Luckily, we have a loot in the command zone, which is a really easy, guaranteed way that we're going to be able to bin this guy. And if you're not familiar, the disturbed side of Malevolent Hermit is basically a form of silence for us. It just says that our non-creature spells can't be countered. This is going to allow our combo to go through relatively protected. Of course, we talked about it earlier, but we have Mockingbird and Phyrexian Metamorph, again, as clones, not only because they're good, but because they can outlet. We are on Opposition Agent, although you could make an argument to cut it if you wanted to go even more proactive with the list. I just think that this is such an incredibly powerful card effect. I don't really want to cut it because I like its ability in the mid-range game. Also because our deck is really, really good with tutors. Being able to steal a tutor out of another deck means so much. Next, we have Snapcaster Mage. Now, this is relevant because it's able to buy back our Retraction Helix and or our Banishing Knack, as well as being able to operate really powerfully in some Gifts Ungiven piles. The first one I'd say is just with the Retraction Helix and Banishing Knack. If you do need to launch a Gifts Ungiven to be able to find that portion of the combo, you can find Snapcaster, Banishing, and Retraction. All of a sudden, you have a 3-card proposition where you're going to get one of those pieces. But I digress. The most commonplace gifts pile where we're going to be utilizing Snapcaster is the traditional one where we'll get Snapcaster Mage, Thoracle, and then we're also going to grab Demonic Consultation and Reanimate. This gives our opponents no real great choices, but the best one they're going to give us is going to be handing us our Snapcaster Mage and our Thassa's Oracle. This requires us to have 3 blue pips and a black pip, as well as 2 other mana. We have 2 blue mana to cast the Thassas, 1 blue, 1 generic to cast the Snapcaster, target the Demonic Consultation, cast it for 1 black. Because Snapcaster has flash, we're able to do the whole play Thassa's Oracle, hold priority on the ETB, Snapcaster Decon. This is a nice clean way to set up a win where we get to go end step gifts right into that combo. But I digress. I really like Snapcasters too, just to be able to buy back our main combo when we need to. Again, we briefly talked about it, but Spellseeker is going to be able to find Retraction Helix or Banishing Knack, but it also can go find a Transmute Artifact or Merchant Scroll when we need to pivot it into an outlet. Of course, as I said before, we are on Thoracle with Tainted Pact, Demonic Consultation. This is your backup plan when your main combo gets blown out, or it's your primary plan if you just happen to draw into this bad boy. We already talked about all this. We are on Gitaxian Probe not only because I love information farming, which I do, but we really want to be able to crack top deck tutors in this deck so that we can tutor Emperor's Ender win in the same turn and stay really proactive and aggressive with that turbo strategy. So I really like Gitaxian Probe. It's free, man. Can't argue with that. I am on Seagate Restoration, which maybe doesn't seem entirely necessary, but again, because of the insane density of outlets we have in the deck, if we are looking at just a Seagate Restoration, like a grip of lands, we could still launch our combo and just roll those dice. If I'm drawing 4 to 5 cards, I mean, the odds of us getting an outlet are pretty high. Love, love, love Transmute Artifact in this deck. Love the One Ring. It's super powerful, given that it not only is just a really good draw engine, but it can outlet for her combo. Being able to transmute for the One Ring or just Mox Amber or whatever, so good. Such a powerful card. Now that we get into the instance, we can talk a little bit more about the interaction. We are on an Offer You Can't Refuse, although you could absolutely cut it. I really don't love Offer as a card, but because we are in a turbo, really proactive strategy, being able to pivot Offer into a ritual by taking care of a late game Chromox or Diamond or something with an Offer You Can't Refuse to pivot into treasures, I do think is relatively strong. Speaking of other kind of proactive leaning inclusions, we are on Daze. Sorry, this makes you laugh because at SCGCon Hartford, when I was in game with Comedian, who I don't know if you guys saw the video, go check it out. It's legendary, but he did an undefeated run in Swiss on SpongeBob. But in one of our games during Swiss, the only piece of interaction I had in hand at the moment was Daze, which just happened to be the Mr. Krabs version. So I was able to flash it to him. It was this huge laugh. He's like, Sponge Boy me, Bob. Unfortunately, it wasn't very valuable at the time, but it was super funny. Anyway, I love Daze as a very proactive leaning piece of interaction. We have a pretty good package of fetch lands. The idea that we're going to have an island in one of the first few turns of the game allows us to be a really traditional, just free counterspell to help protect our line. Of course, we have a really low curve commander, so we're playing both free spells. We have the Deadly Rollick and the Fierce Guardianship. We're on the Dispel. We got the Force of Will, the Fluster, all the traditional includes, the Mental Misstep. We are on Misdirection. Now, this is another proactive leaning decision, investing in the turbo strategy. We're not on Force and Negation. We can't use it on our turn, man. It's not good in the first 1 to 2 turns of the game, so unfortunately, it's a cut that we just kind of had to make. Now, this, I would not blame you if you wanted to be on Force and Negation. For me, I'd prefer to be on Misdirection. Again, it's just aggressive, man. We're just trying to win and sneak under things right now. I think turbo is really powerful if we can find that niche, and most of the games I win, it's because I've turboed really aggressively. We are on Sink into Stupor, which could pivot into interaction. Most of the time, this is a land that's kind of pitchable to Chromox, but I love the versatility of it. Again, shout out my boy TTC for our convo with this one. And of course, we're on Swan Song, just really powerful. But staying here in the instance, the rest of the stuff we got going on, Dark Ritual might seem a little bit confusing when we kind of scope out the rest of the list, but I still think it's a really powerful mana acceleration. We have some expensive cards. I like dropping an early One Ring, being able to accelerate into a Tezzeret feels pretty good. And of course, we're trying to aggressively get that turn 1 Rona, so being able to go land, Dark Rit, Arcane Signet, Rona, also pretty powerful. We are on Limdul's Vault. I love Limdul's Vault. This card is absolutely cooked. My favorite thing about this card is when people ask me if I'm on Adnaz, I tell them I'm not on Adnaz, I'm not on Necro, which by the way, I'll talk about in a second, but I am on Limdul's, so you better get me while you can. Limdul's is really cool because we can crack our Limdul piles, right? So we get to go through our 5 cards and Rona can always rip the top one off. If it happens to be a legendary like our Mox Amber, we can then go again because we can cast Mox Amber, get a loot off of Rona, bada bing, bada boom. Of course, we're on Into the Flood Maw, best bounce ability in the game, in my opinion. Rip Chains of Vapor, unless you're able to use it as like a combo enabler, so on and so forth. And that's about it. We got the rest of the tutor package. I'm sure you guys have already scoped. Very obvious include stuff. Moving into the artifacts, we talked about our Agatha Soul Cauldron. We are on the Arcane Signet, the Felwar Stone. We're on Grim Monolith. This is an artifact, increase our metalcraft, allows us to power out early Tezzerets, things like that. I can bin it to Transmute Artifact, which allows me to grab my One Ring. Has some versatility, but we are a little hungry for the mana, being an aggressive leaning deck. We're on that defense grid. Love defense grid. This is another way for us to get a silent space effect off. I really like defense grid because we can find it also off of Tezzeret. This is pretty sneaky because people kind of equate Tezzeret now to like go get the ring. Sometimes if the board state allows, you could play a Tezzeret down and kind of like, what's the word? I guess sandbag him by going and grabbing your Mox Amber and being like, whatever. And maybe I'll get the one ring next turn. But then go into your next turn and then grab your defense grid. Now you've already gotten half your combo and protection off of one Tezzeret. Pretty cool. Of course, we're going to be on the mana vault. We want that mana. Lotus Petal again, that turn 1 Rona. Moonsilver Key being able to find us that outlet, being able to find us a setup. With this one. We're on that Mox Diamond, turn 1 Rona. We're on Soul Ring, obviously. Talisman of Dominance, yada yada. Now, WISHCLAW Talisman. This is a very important card because in our brew, WISHCLAW Talisman represents another potential 1-card win condition, same as Gifts Ungiven, except this one is in line with our regular Rona combo. It is a bit expensive unless you can push it out over multiple turns by deploying WISHCLAW Talisman early. If you do it all at once, just have Rona and you have a WISHCLAW in hand, it's going to cost you 7 mana and you need to pay attention to your pips. But you're going to cast out your WISHCLAW Talisman and crack it for 2 generic and a black. You go and find your Retraction Helix, you'll need a blue, cast it, put it onto Rona. Use Rona, target the WISHCLAW Talisman, recast it, 1 of the black, reactivate it for another generic, and go get your Mox Amber. Cast your Mox Amber, untapping your Rona. Now you have a Retraction Helix, Rona, and a Mox Amber. Do your combo, producing infinite mana. At the end of your combo, tap Rona to bounce the WISHCLAW again. Now you have your tutor to go get your true outlet. And again, if you're pinched on black mana, you can flip your Rona with your infinite blue to get your last black pip to recast the WISHCLAW Talisman. Go find your Walking Ballista, win the game. If you are able to deploy the WISHCLAW Talisman a turn in advance, it will reduce the line down to 5 mana going into the following turn, but just pay attention. Of course, then we have Mystic Remora and Rhystic Study. These are just obvious includes and allow us to kind of pivot into the mid-range. I was on Mirror Maid and I did take it to SCG Con. It was kind of a budget thing because it was a proxyless tournament. Now, granted, I think Mirror Maid is a really good card, but I've just run into way too many situations where there's nothing I really want to copy, and I would so much prefer it to be something proactive that leans into my strategy. Again, I really like picturing this deck as turbo as our goal, mid-range is our pivot, and we do both relatively strong. Moving into the lands, nothing too crazy. I do want to note that we have both Ancient Tomb and City of Traders because we're leaning turbo. We are on a good number of fetches. We're on the Forbidden Orchard. I don't care, dude. There's somebody I can give a spirit to. We're on a basic island. I really like this for our days. I really want our days to be turned on, and being on the fetches feels so good on one basic island. We're on Manamo. Not only does this synergize with the One Ring, obviously, but it can also give us an untap on Rona, which can sometimes be so important. We are also on Seat of the Synoid and Vault of Whispers. I feel like these are both really important in the deck for turning on Metalcraft through Mox Opal. In the post-Dockside world, they're kind of going completely unpunished. Sometimes you'll run into the occasional stacks deck with a Karn or something, and then you get to go boo-hoo. It's not a big deal, dude. It is worth it to have that Mox Opal potentially turned on. Of course, we're on that one Surveil land. How could we not be, baby? Time Walk, am I right? And we are on URZA'S Saga, the best, most powerful land in the deck. Anytime you see URZA'S Saga and one tutor in hand, you're looking at a potential turn 3 win attempt. URZA'S Saga is already finding you your Mox Amber. Your tutor can find you your Retraction Helix. Turn 1, whatever the heck you want. Turn 2, Rona. Turn 3, bada bing. Am I right? And that's about it for the list, guys, but I know as I'm scrolling through this thing, you're probably thinking to yourself, what the heck? Where's the Isochron Scepter? Where's the Adnaz? Where's the Necro? Where's the Doomsday? Where's the good Rona stuff? See, now that's what we're talking about. Innovation, baby. I would make a deep spiritual argument that those things really aren't necessary and they don't highlight the strengths of Rona. If you want to play Adnaz, there are decks that Adnaz stronger. If you want to play Necro, there are decks that Necro stronger. If you want to play ISO, there are decks that ISO stronger. And I personally don't like a lot of those strategies right now, at least. I think ISO Rev is a bit clunky and it requires you to play 2 cards that don't really do much of anything unless you're already able to do your combo. And it's more expensive. Doomsday, Adnaz, Necro all require a ton of black pips. I know it might seem like a small grievance, but it's pretty hard to produce those in the first few turns of the game. Ideally, I'm trying to turn 2 out here, and in Dimir, having to rely on ripping a Dark Ritual or a Cabal rip, which we're also not on, in order to be able to present an early Necro is really kind of painful. Having Necro just be a mid-range tool, it's all right, and I'm no bag. If you want to play Necro, you absolutely can. I was on Necro for a period of time, but I just found that being able to lean even harder, more aggressively into this proactive strategy always felt way better. And Adnos, although it could have been good, I'm a little greedy in the list. You know, we have a bunch of expensive things. We got Tezzeret, which I'm absolutely not going to cut. We have Venser, which I would prefer not to cut for me personally. We're on Seagate Restoration, which I really don't want to be taking that 7 damage. We're on the Deadly Relic. We're on Misdirection and Force. We have a ton of hits off of Adnos that are just going to absolutely brick us, completely domed. And last but not least, of course, there is Doomsday, which not only does it still suffice, same argument as Necro, really hard to make those triple black pips, but also we get completely blown out. If somebody has the sauce to absolutely ruin our day when we resolve our Doomsday, we're just done. We're out of the game. I just don't feel like it is necessary to have to run these kind of balls to the walls cards when we have such a clean combo that we can just really put our heart and soul into. So when you're piloting the deck, we have 2 states of play and a couple things to pay attention to. 1, as we've already discussed, turbo. You are leaning turbo and aggressive. Here's what you want to look for, and we'll hopefully go over some test hands. When you're mulliganing, you're looking for that turn 1 Rona. You're looking for Chrome Mox, Mox Diamond, Lotus Petal, Gemstone, so on and so forth. Second to that, you are looking for 2 pieces of your combo or representing your combo. I know that sounds really greedy, but again, we're in Dimir and you've seen our deck, right? So we either need Mox Amber, Mox Opal, Retraction, or Banishing Knack in hand, or tutors in their place, which represent the ability to find them. It sounds kind of crazy on paper, but it really isn't. If you pull a grip and you're looking at a Vamp Tutor Mox Amber, hello, you got it. If you pull a grip and you're looking at URZA'S Saga Demonic Tutor, there it is. You can easily find this or at least draw into it. Obviously, we're talking kind of ideals and the things that you're mulliganing for to be completely proactive, but it's a lot more common than you'd think. Secondary, of course, we're in Dimir, so we're looking for draw engines or huge advantage propositions. And this is where your mid-range pivot kind of comes in. I try not to mulligan for this, but if I have to, based on pod composition or where my seating is, I will mulligan more aggressively for my draw engines. Of course, you can mulligan down looking for a fish or a Rhystic Study or a way to get there. You can very easily have something like a City of Traders and City of Brass in hand and 1 tutor. That represents a turn 2 Rhystic Study. Or if you have the ability to get or already have the One Ring and you have Mana Vault or Dark Writ, you can have an early the One Ring. We're in Dimir, so we just have good stuff where we can go for relatively good advantage starts. But again, I really would push for you to try to be aggressive with the list. It will surprise you how well that works. Last but not least, I want to talk about how the deck's been performing and maybe do some test hands and just a couple words of caution. I want you to understand it's incredibly powerful being able to use Rona to crack our top deck tutors, but be very careful. When you really go to do your combo, you need an untapped Rona. So if you are finding, like, let's say you have an URZA'S Saga, and URZA'S Saga is how you're going to find your Mox Amber. You have to pay attention to the fact that you're not going to have the cast of the Mox Amber in order to gain an untapped Rona. So say you're going into the turn and you have a Mystical Tutor in hand and an URZA'S Saga that's about to go off. Don't miss your window. Don't think that you have Rona to crack your Mystical Tutor, so you go into main phase, find your Mox Amber, so on and so forth, and then find yourself in this situation where you need to tap Rona to draw your Mystical Tutor card, but you don't have the legendary to then get an untap because your Mox Amber went right into play. Instead, make sure you launch that Mystical Tutor in upkeep so that you can draw it for turn and be ready to go. By that same notion, pay close attention when you're going to push into Rhystics and Mystics and things like that you do have another legendary or some situation where you're going to be able to use your Retraction Helix ability to push through that line and truly go infinite. Pay really close attention when you have those flexible cards that can be reset like Spellseeker or Trinket Mage. A lot of times when you're looking at a hand, if you're not paying close enough attention, you see you have a Mox Amber Spellseeker, or something even a little less obvious, but you don't have an outlet, you don't have an obvious outlet, don't forget that some of these cards are your outlet. Spellseeker is your outlet, as well as finding that Retraction Helix. Don't be afraid to go for your Thoracle combo. I know that we want to lean really aggressive into Rona because it's hyper efficient, but when we're pushing into the mid-range, don't forget Thoracle is so good. Also, don't be afraid to ditch your pieces in Rona. Looting is incredibly powerful, and we have a lot of lines, a lot of outs. If something isn't helping you at the moment, just get rid of it. Get rid of your Walking Ballista. Hell, even get rid of your Thoracle. We're on Reanimate, dog. You want to talk about a surprise? Ditch that Thoracle early and bring it back with a Reanimate Decon. Ba-boom. Don't underestimate how powerful a play it is to top deck tutor your Malevolent Hermit with a Vamp or something, and then intentionally discard it to immediately get your Benevolent Geist. Strong way to suddenly have a silence. Don't immediately cut stock up. Be a gamer. Try it out, dude. It's actually a pretty cool card. Of course, we have the ability to go flash speed. Pay attention to your opportunities in mid-range to Born Upon the Wind and just play that long game. And that's about it, guys. It isn't too crazy, but you really do need to study these lines, these outlets, know where your pivots are. It's super important to pay attention to these intricacies and where you're going to find your way out. To really master this deck, I say you definitely want to spend some time with it. Get a ton of test games in and really pay attention to the cards in your hand. Take a deep breath and see what the cards do. Pay very close attention to what is legendary. Odds are if it's legendary, man, you can win the game with that thing. Now, like I was mentioning, we did have a couple successes of late with the list. The last two tournaments I went to, we did convert. We got a top 10 at the May 2K over at King's Court in Taunton. It was a little bit of a smaller tournament, but still, it counts, baby. We also made top 16 at SCG Con Hartford. That was a really cool one. We were off of Transmute Artifact. And I think there was one, oh yeah, Underground Sea, of course, because it was a proxy list event, but it was a super fun one, and the deck performed really, really well until I completely threw it in the top 16 match against Comedian. It was super funny, right? So like I was so tunnel visioned on creating my window, and Kinnan had a freaking Wandering Archaic and a Spellskite. Spellskite is like our worst enemy because we can't resolve our Retraction Helix or our Banishing Knack when a Spellskite is out. So I did run into the situation where, and I won't get too into it because, again, Comedian has a great video up kind of going over the tournament, but there was a situation right before my turn. There's a Rogthras, then it's me, then it's Kinnan, then it's Comedian. Comedian has like all of his resources available, but he's been completely blown out this game. You can go hear the story. But basically, Rogthras has infinite resources and goes to put a Seaborn on the stack, and I have that Mystical Teachings we talked about in my hand. So I'm orchestrating a plan in my mind. Also in my hand at this time, I have Thassa's Tainted, and that's mainly the way I plan to win since I can't get around the Spellskite. But at this point, I'm thinking I really need to get rid of the Wandering Archaic because the only way I can launch this thing based on my available resources was to jam Thassa's Whole Priority Tainted, but then I'd give Kinnan a Tainted pack and allow them the immediate answer to stop me. So I'm thinking I use the mask of needing to stop the Seaborn to launch my Mystical Teachings, which would tap me out of all of my colored mana, and give Kinnan a copy, but politic it so that Kinnan goes and finds into the Flood Maw. He ends up finding a Pognify, but same deal, to deal with the Seaborn Muse at end step when it resolves. I feign that maybe I'll get this Force of Will, and I switch it over to Into the Flood Maw, saying just for backup to deal with the Seaborn Muse later. Little did they know that this was all a plan so that I could use the Mystical Teachings to get my own Into the Flood Maw, go into my turn and launch the Into the Flood Maw on the Wandering Archaic. I'll allow them to get a copy, it doesn't really matter. I don't need any of the pieces so I can go into my Thassa's Tainted. This I was thinking was super smart, but it required me to tap out of my resources, for Kinnan to tap out of their resources, and for us to have a relatively, very visible conversation about the fact that we don't really have a lot of other interaction. This very unfortunately was painting this masterwork of a window for Comedian to take advantage of, which props to Comedian. He still was able to pull off like an insane line to squeeze into that window. But yeah, dude, I definitely cranked that bitch right open. I was kicking myself after this because I was thinking, dude, bro, reverse Thoracle. What am I, goobered? Dude, I launched Tainted Pact on my turn. Sure, have your Wandering Cake. I don't care. Don't act like I'm doing nothing crazy. Exile my library. Oracle. Bro, nobody had any interaction. If as long as Kinnan didn't get the one random thing he could maybe grab to blow me out, like Endurance or whatever, dog, I'm in the money. But either way, we had a really good run. It was a super awesome tournament. The deck performed really well. My Swiss rounds, I was able to get a turn 2 win in one of them, and what is technically a turn 3, but I was seat 1, so it felt more like a turn 2 in the other one. Otherwise, we had really great breakers. We were able to ride some IDs, but also a draw that I worked really hard to get in order to get into the top cut there. There were a couple games we probably could have won along the way, but yo, it feels so good when you are sitting pretty kind of locked and you're able to just be like, yay, can we just draw? I can go check out some vendors, get a bite to eat, and have some energy built up into the later rounds. Either way, these are really recent performances. The last 2 tournaments I went to, we were able to convert, and I really believe in this deck. I think that if you guys try it out for yourself and take the time to do the learning principles, and feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions or things that you want to vet by me if I think a particular change might go well. But I do implore you, actually take a minute to test the list as is, even with some of the kind of like niche inclusions, because you run the risk of wanting to do this thing, right? Where like, ooh, let me take out Ashiok for just a more generic good card. Let me take out, Narset for just a generic good card. Let me take out that Venser, so on and so forth, right? As you do more and more of this sculpting to make the deck good stuff, you start to dissolve that value proposition we talked about earlier. If you just want to play purest good stuff, there are decks, there are methods, there are higher color piles, there are T and Ks waiting for you in the shadows. But if you want to lean into this really powerful, very efficient combo in this proactive strategy and play something a little bit off of the current meta, then I think Rona could be the deck for you. What's up guys, Editor Dan here, breaking in at the end of the video just to say that I went ahead and finished up the edit for the test hands and mulligan guide section, but it ended up being like way too long, and with the interest of not wanting to cause a panic when people saw the hour and 20-minute timestamp on my deck video, and also so I didn't have to cut any of those test hands because a lot of them are really interesting, I went ahead and pulled that out of this video. It'll be in a separate video that you guys can click the link to watch right here at the end of this one, and then hopefully you do. It's pretty interesting stuff, but just for the sake of time, we went ahead and moved it on out. But with that being said, that's actually going to be the end of this video, since after the test hands, I basically just did the outro. So if you guys liked the deck here, go ahead down into the YouTube section and give your boy some love. Hit a like, hit a follow, sub, you know the deal. And if you guys are interested in learning more about Rona or have questions for me personally, you can go ahead and join up at the cEDH Network Discord. And I'm also starting a Rona-specific Discord for cEDH, which I'll have linked down below, but for right now, it's just going to be the bare bones, but feel free to jump in there if you're curious. At the moment, I don't really offer any coaching or anything, give you my absolutely deplorable top deck record, given that I'm usually on some jank that I don't convert with. But like I said, I really believe in this one, so if you guys are interested in anything like that in the future and I continue to perform well, maybe that's something we could talk about. Otherwise, y'all, thanks for going along the ride and watching the deck with me. Hopefully you test out Rona for yourself and have a lot of success. And remember, click that link at the end of this video to see some test hands and mulligans and get into how the deck actually plays. But that's going to wrap it up, everybody. So good luck out there, and I'll catch you next time.